Hey everyone, and welcome to SkillCapped's patch 1.03 rundown and tier list. In this patch, we'll be seeing a big buff to the Guardian weapon, changes to how surrendering will work, and a variety of other quality of life changes. As per usual, we consulted with the top players and coaches to help break down exactly what these changes mean, along with a detailed tier list of what the best agents in the game are. But before we jump into it, make sure that you're subscribed with the bell icon on to stay up to date with the meta and get premium guides with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. Alright, I'm really excited to get into this, starting with the changes to the Guardian weapon. It will be having its price reduced from 2700 to 2500, rate of fire reduced from 6.5 to 4.75, penetration power is increased from medium to heavy, and its input Q updated from 0.083 to 0.1175. For those wondering what input Q is, it refers to the amount of time that you can buffer a shot if you click before the gun can actually shoot again. Essentially, with the Guardian now shooting slower, they've increased the buffer time to help compensate. So these buffs were definitely warranted. Most of the top players would agree that the Guardian is probably the worst gun in the game right now, and mainly has to do with one thing: the price. Here's the thing though, we're not exactly convinced that lowering it from 2700 to 2500 will be enough. Hear us out. So one of the main selling points of the Guardian is its one-shot headshot potential at long range. Other cheaper options that offer one-shot potential like the Bucky need to be used in close range quarters. While again, other cheaper options that can make quick work of opponents like the Stinger or Spectre also need to be used in close range. So the Guardian is unique in that it fills this long range one-shot role, right? Well, guess what else one-shot headshots? The Marshal, and it's only 1100 credits. That's 1400 credits cheaper even after the Guardian's buff. Well, you might be thinking, well sure, the Marshal can one-shot to the head, but it's bolt action and isn't semi-automatic like the Guardian. And that's really the only thing the Guardian has going for it, is that it can one-shot to the head while having a somewhat fast fire rate. But when we look at the patch notes, we can see they've lowered that fire rate from 6.5 to 4.75. So one of its main unique benefits is being nerfed on this patch. Additionally, consider the Bulldog, which is 2100 credits, 400 cheaper than the new Guardian. Its alternative fire mode shoots in a burst of 3, and each bullet does 116 damage to the head with no damage fall off at range. What this means is that if 2 bullets from this burst hit an opponent in the head, that they're dead, along with the fact that its main fire mode is automatic with a fire rate of 9.15 rounds a second. Essentially, if you want the long-range headshot potential, you can get that from the Marshal for a whopping 1400 credits cheaper. If you want something more versatile that can also fight in close quarters, well then the Bulldog can still provide long-range one-shot headshots with its alternative firing mode while being able to spray at close range, all for 400 credits cheaper. And this is why the nerf to the Guardian's fire rate this patch is so important. Keep in mind that it would have actually done more DPS to the body than the Bulldog before this fire rate nerf. The Bulldog currently does 320 damage per second to the body. The old Guardian did 423 damage per second to the body. However, the new Guardian only does 306 damage per second. So yeah, it's looking like these changes to the Guardian won't be enough to suddenly make it a viable pick, being overshadowed by the Marshal and Bulldog. This got us thinking though, what buffs would you give to the Guardian? Personally, I think its price has to drop to 2100 to match the Bulldog and be an alternative to it, similar to how you can choose between the Vandal and Phantom at the 2900 price point. But what buffs would you guys give it? Let us know in the comment section below, as we'd love to hear your thoughts. Moving on, there were a few map updates which are mainly bug fixes. On Haven, they removed a spot where the spike was unable to be retrieved once dropped, and all maps fixed multiple spots where players were able to clip inside geometry. If you're wondering what this is referring to, there was an exploit with Reyna where you could go inside containers using your dismiss ability. They also removed more locations where Sova's sensor arrow was able to go through walls. So yeah, overall, some healthy changes that were needed. One of the bigger changes of the patch though is how the surrender vote will now work. Unrated mode vote requirements to pass have been changed from 100% to 80%. This means in the unrated queue, only 4 out of 5 teammates need to vote yes to have the surrender vote pass. However, in ranked, the vote requirement to pass still remains at 100%, meaning all teammates have to vote yes. Another great quality of life change is that you can now surrender vote earlier, starting with round 5 instead of round 8. That being said, you have to keep in mind that you can only have 1 surrender vote per half, so if your team votes no on that surrender vote on round 5, you'll have to wait until round 13 when you switch sides in order to vote again. Competitive matches will also be receiving a new win-by-2 overtime format, with automated votes on whether the game should continue or end in a draw. Instead of playing a single sudden death round, teams will alternate playing rounds on attack and defense until a team claims victory by being up by 2 rounds. Each round will have a full reset, setting all players at 5,000 credits and 4 points short of their ultimate. After every 2 rounds of overtime, an automated vote will trigger to determine if the match should continue or end in a draw. The threshold for continuing the match will become stricter as more rounds have been played. And here's what's most interesting, is that players might gain rank off a draw, but will never lose rank. On one hand, Valorant games are already extremely long, and having it go longer isn't the most exciting thing, but the win by 2 overtime format is definitely more fair, so there's a trade-off going on. What do you guys think though? Overall, I think this is a good change and definitely appreciate not losing rank off a draw, as that would be super tilting. In addition to this, there are a ton of other quality of life changes, but we just want to highlight the most important ones. The first being that players in custom games with cheats enabled can select a different agent to use on the next round in the cheats menu. This means if you're in a custom game practicing lineups, you no longer have to exit the game and remake it just to select a different agent, which will make practicing a lot easier. They've also updated the censored hit impact effects for better readability. This means that if you don't have blood enabled, you instead get hit markers that look like sparks. Many players complained that it was hard to tell the difference between a shoulder shot and a headshot. This is what they've now fixed. Another massive change is that you can now see agent silhouettes for observers along with agent health bars. This is huge for the esports scene, as now when it comes to spectating, it will be a lot more similar to Counter-Strike, where you're able to see outlines of enemies through walls. And finally, custom games now have a tournament mode option. This is something we predicted would be coming in our recent leak video. This will allow every player in the game to have access to the toggle match timer cheat in-game without having all other cheats enabled. Overall, some much needed changes to improve the viewer experience when it comes to the esports scene. Alright, so moving on to the tier list for patch 1.03. This tier list aims to break down what are considered the best and worst picks currently at the professional level. This is different than a solo queue only tier list, something we actually created very recently if that's more your style. Click the card in the top right corner of the screen if you want to check it out. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into the S tier. Our most accurate snapshot of the pro meta comes from the most recent tournament, the T1 Nerd Street Gamer Showdown. And there were some really interesting stats to come out of this tournament. Firstly, Cypher was the most picked agent, the first one to surpass Sage in that slot since Valorant's release, with a pick rate of 95% compared to Sage having a pick rate of 90%. So yeah, Cypher has become the new pro team favorite. And although stats don't tell the whole story, we really can't disagree with this narrative, which is why both Cypher and Sage are our S tier agents for this patch. What this means is that they are mandatory picks on every single map. And their rise to power is no coincidence. As players figure out how to play the game better, the pros are coming to realize just how important having an agent that can solo hold a site to free up rotations can be. Let me explain. Let's take the newest map Ascent as an example. You have 2 bomb sites, A and B. Currently the meta is to put Sage on B to solo hold the choke point there, and Cypher on A to solo hold the choke point there. This then frees up the other 3 players to help control mid, with 1 player on catwalk and usually 2 floating near market. This not only helps you stack defenders on the most important area of the map on Ascent, middle, but also allows them to rotate fast to whatever bomb site the enemy is trying to attack while Cypher or Sage stalls the push. And since every single map has this formula of 2 bomb sites, it makes these 2 solo defenders kind of mandatory. Well, that is, every single map except Haven, which you think would break the formula and allow for more variety in picks, but no, it actually has the opposite effect. On Haven, which has 3 bomb sites, Cypher and Sage were picked by pro teams 100% of the time. That's the only map with this stat. Again, this makes perfect sense when you think about it. On a 3 bomb site map, being able to solo hold a bomb site becomes even more important, since you're even more spread out and rotations become even more important too. So yeah, without direct nerfs to Sage or Cypher, they will likely remain in the S tier for a while, just simply due to how the Valorant meta has developed around the maps. Alright, next we have the A tier, where you'll find Brimstone and Sova hanging out. However, Brimstone is much more of a staple than Sova, picked in 76% of all pro games in the recent tournament, and Sova picked 55% of the time. Here's the thing, smokes are mandatory when it comes to Valorant, and Brimstone is still the best when it comes to fulfilling this role. His smokes provide the most amount of vision blocking, compared to Omen, whose smokes are hollow, while being the easiest and fastest to put down. But what really puts him above other vision deniers is that he has his Molotov, which is probably the best push denying ability in the game. Sure, Sage has her slow or wall, but those can be broken or pushed through. Cypher has his tripwires and cages, but again, those can be destroyed and pushed through. Brimstone's Molly, on the other hand, really can't be pushed through unless you want to take nearly all of your health, as it does a ton of damage. It's also one of the longest lasting abilities of that type in the game, buying you a ton of time for your team to rotate. It's this combination of top tier smokes, with his Molotov being one of the best abilities in the game, that puts him at the top of the A tier. Sova, on the other hand, might be a bit surprising to some, thinking that Raze or Breach would take this slot. However, the information that Sova can provide in a coordinated team environment is insanely valuable and unmatched. A simple recon bolt at the start of the round can either inform you that 3 enemies are stacked in that area, telling you that a push is coming and getting your team to rotate, or at the same time, if no enemies are visible, then you can rotate off that site and lean more towards the other side of the map, anticipating an attack there. Not to mention that on attack, his Owl Drone is one of the best abilities in the game. You get a teammate to push behind it and the drone clears all the corners for you, and if an enemy tries to shoot it down, your teammate can swing into getting a kill on them while they're distracted. In fact, these 4 agents we just went over, Cypher, Sage, Brimstone, and Sova, make up the most popular and powerful team composition in the game currently. This frees up the 5th slot to be optional and adjusted based on the individual team strategy or player preference, along with what's best for the map that they're playing on. Speaking of these optional pickups, we have the B tier, where you'll find Raze, Omen, Breach, Phoenix, and Jet. Each of these agents have similar power levels when combined with the team composition above, but at the same time offer unique strengths and weaknesses based on the map played. For example, pro teams are loving Raze on Bind and Split, with an 81% pick rate on Bind and 65% on Split. However, she has a measly pick rate of 10% on Ascent and 17% on Haven. This is likely due to the fact that Bind and Split offer a lot tighter choke points across the map that highly favor Raze's AoE damage in her kit, along with just being smaller maps in general. Ascent and Haven are much bigger maps and more spread out, making her AoE abilities less impactful. Instead, in this 5th slot for these maps, pro teams are going with Phoenix the most, with a 38% pick rate on Ascent and 39% pick rate on Haven. We find a similar trend with another agent that can flash, Breach, who has a 35% pick rate on Haven and 25% pick rate on Ascent. Obviously, pro teams are valuing the utility of flashes from Breach and Phoenix on these maps more than the raw damage from Raze. And this is the main trend of the B tier agents. It's not to say that one of the agents is outright more powerful than another B tier agent. Instead, their power levels vary greatly based on the map that they're being played on. This is the opposite of the S tier and A tier agents, whose power is much more consistent across all of the maps. Alright, moving on to the C tier, where we have Reyna chilling by herself. Initially on release, Reyna's pick rate was pretty high in the pro scene, averaging at around a 50% pick rate. However, that pick rate continues to drop after each major tournament, with her currently sporting a 17% pick rate overall. And that does make perfect sense, as she's designed to be a self-sufficient solo queue agent, not one to exactly mesh well in team play. In terms of helping the team, she really only brings her blind, but both Breach and Phoenix can fulfill the role of the flasher while bringing other utility on top of that to help the team as a whole. That's not to say that she isn't great to pick up in solo queue. In fact, spoiler alert, we actually placed her in the S tier on our solo queue tier list. It's just that if you're going to be queuing up with a pre-made, you're better off playing Phoenix or Breach to bring the same flash potential along with a ton more. And lastly, we have the D tier, where to no one's surprise, we find Viper. Despite the changes received last patch, she had an abysmal 1% pick rate in the recent pro tournament. In general, she's only ever seen play on the map Split due to her ability to wall off so much of A site on attack and having that one-way smoke and mailroom at mid. Her biggest issue is that so much of her kit has to do with vision denial, which is a role so many other agents do better. It's not just Brimstone and Omen, even Jet after the buffs to her smoke duration can offer comparable vision denial to Viper. Then you have her ground poison, which doesn't do as much damage as something like a Brimstone Molly. And her ultimate is probably the weakest ultimate in the game and is definitely the most situational. There's no guarantee you'll get any kills with it, as it doesn't offer you any kind of boost to your combat abilities. So unless she gets a rework or continues to receive buffs in a later patch, don't expect her to rise up the list anytime soon. Alright, so what do you think of the Guardian changes? Do you think they'll be enough to make it a viable pickup as a weapon? If not, what changes would you make to it? Let us know in the comment section below, and while you're down there, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with the meta and get premium guides with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.